Will the secretary please call the roll?
Senator Rocky Adams. Senator Alvarado.
Here.
Senator Yates. Representative Bridges.
Here.
Representative Frazier Gordon.
Present.
Representative Marzian.
Here in my district office.
Thank you. Senator West.
Present.
Representative Hale.
Present.
We have a quorum.
First matter of business is approval of the minutes of last meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval? We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. If you are joining us via video conference, please mute your phones. Please call the first regulation.
Secretary of State, 30 KAR 5011, 21, 31, 41, 51, and 60. All except 31 have staff suggested amendments.
These regulations establish definitions, filing methods and forms, procedures for the acceptance and refusal of records, the UCC information management system, filing, indexing, and data entry procedures, and public access to UCC records. They all have staff suggested amendments which amend various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Good afternoon. Would you identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon, Senator. I'm Michael Wilson. I'm the Director of Business Services for Kentucky Secretary of State Michael Adams.
Thank you. There are staff amendments. Do we have a motion for approval of the staff amendments? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, is so ordered. So we have in front of us this set of regs with approved staff amendments. Any questions for the Secretary of State's office on this set of regs? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Personnel Board, 101 KAR 1 325. This does not have additional amendments.
101 KAR 1325 amends to reduce the mandatory probationary for the job classifications of Revenue Auditor 1 and Revenue Field Auditor 1 from 12 months to 6 months.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon, Stafford Easterling, General Counsel of the Kentucky Personnel Board.
There are no amendments or additions. Any questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Finance and Administration Cabinet, Kentucky Retirement Systems, 105 KAR 1 210, 310, and 330. All with staff suggested amendments.
105 KR 1210, 310, and 330 all amend to reflect changes enacted by the General Assembly, clarify existing language, and update incorporate forms. The staff amendments for these regulations amend to make technical changes, changes for clarity, and changes to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Yes, my name is Carrie Bass. I'm a staff attorney supervisor with the Kentucky Public Pensions Authority. I'm joined today by a couple of my colleagues in our Office of Benefits, Liza Welch, Wendy Pierce, and Jeff Pritchett.
Thank you. We have staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendments?
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Without objection, so ordered. Any questions from members? Okay. Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Boards and Commissions, Board of Nursing, 201 KAR 20 471, 472, 474, 476, and 478. All except 471 have staff suggested amendments.
201 KR 2471 repeals 201 KR 2470 because its provisions are covered elsewhere. 201 KR 2472 establishes requirements for a dialysis technician program application and increases the application fee from $950 to $2,000, provides approval for a technician that completed an out-of-state program, provides program structure guidelines, states minimum qualifications for an administrator and assistant, provides educational and credential requirements for faculty, creates a system of official records and reports, defines didactic faculty, heightens requirements for students, training programs, and internships, allows for distance learning, requires publication of pre-admission requirements, sets program completion requirements, requires students to hold a current basic life support certificate, and incorporates forms. The amended after comments version amends to establish further qualifications for an assistant program administrator, allow the board to waive the requirement to obtain a college degree if otherwise qualified, and provide that a student unable to pass the final exam after 2 attempts may complete an internship before attempting the exam for a 3rd time. 201 KR 2474 establishes dialysis training program site visit standards, provides evaluation standards, creates data collection responsibilities, adds additional voluntary program closure guidelines, increases the continued approval fee from $800 to $1,000, and adds rules for submission dates for continued approval, increases program reinstatement fee from $950 to $1,000, clarifies site visit circumstances and follow-up actions, and provides withdrawal of approval criteria. 201 KR 2476 establishes new requirements for the initial dialysis technician credential, requires an applicant to practice under supervision of a registered nurse, requires an applicant to complete an approved certification for provisional credentials, decreases the renewal fee from $70 to $35, establishes online and paper renewal rules, creates instructions for out-of-state renewals, and incorporates forms. 201 KR 2478 establishes scope of practice for dialysis technicians, adds licensees able to provide supervision, and specifies procedures for disciplinary action. The staff amendments for 201 KR 472, 474, 476, and 478 all amend various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. Additionally, the staff amendment for 201 KR 2472 amends Section 4 to clarify that the board may waive the master's degree requirements for a program administrator upon a showing the administrator is otherwise qualified, such as possessing a minimum of 8 years of experience in dialysis, patient care, and administration. Amends Section 4 to clarify the board may waive the bachelorette degree requirements for an assistant program administrator upon showing the assistant administrator is otherwise qualified, such as possessing a minimum of 5 years of experience in dialysis, patient care, and administration. And amends Section 5 to clarify requirements for didactic faculty, including to allow associate degree from an accredited school of nursing.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon, Jeff Prather, General Counsel, Kentucky Board of Nursing.
Thank you. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments? There is a motion and a second without objection. It is so ordered. Do we have questions from members? Senator Alvarado was first, then Co-Chair Hale after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just really briefly, there's some big fee increases, obviously, in this. One of them is over doubled and 20% increase. Can you just explain the need for that or the purpose of having such a large increase in the fee?
Just due to the monitoring, we're tracking our DT programs does take some time and resources, and having to do this, we added the DTs recently in the last few years, and we learned that we need a little bit more funding to make sure that we can monitor them effectively.
Co-Chair Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and actually Senator Alvarado asked the question that I was going to ask as well. Being on this committee for several years, these significant increases has always thrown up a little bit of a red flag to me, and as the question was, this is over a doubling of the fee plus, but I accept the answer, and thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Representative.
Got a question. How many technicians are you monitoring?
I don't know that off the top of my head. One is
a rough estimate.
I can get that answer back to the the committee if I need to, if the committee would like. I don't know the rough number off the top of my head. I know that we have over 90,000 nurses, and they make up a part of that. But to give you a better number, I would have to.
That's fine. What's involved in the monitoring?
Well, with these programs, we of course have to do site visits where staff goes to make sure that these programs, when we have these programs, that they're operating effectively and safely when they're training our new DTs.
Okay. Yeah, Senator Alvarado.
Thank you. Just a follow up on that. Then, if it's I think in 472 it went from $950 to $2,000 on the fee increase. How much money do you think that's going to generate? In that, I'm sure that wasn't just a random number. There's an estimate as to how much you think that's going to raise in terms of helping with monitoring and the people that are going to be applying. Is there an estimate of how much money you think that was going to generate in fees for the board?
I don't have an estimate of that at this time.
Who made the decision to come to the $2,000 amount then?
That would have been board staff. But I can find out from board staff. I can tell the committee that we started these amendments back November of 2020. We've had multiple conversations with our stakeholders and the various organizations that are training our dialysis technicians, and they did not raise an issue regarding the fees. We did have multiple conversations about the faculty qualifications, but the issue of the fee increase was not raised to board staff.
I think, Mr. Chair, it might be good for us to have that information at some point to find out, how many people this will affect, how much do we think this is going to generate in fees, just to have that information before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Alvarado. I would agree. We have excellent staff here, and I've been handed a note in April of 2021. There were 712 dialysis technicians in the state active in Kentucky. And so, yeah, I agree with Senator Alvarado. If we're advocating for a fee increase in the reg, then the cabinet or the board, I would think should have a pretty good idea of what the number is and the reason for it. So that's troubling that we don't have a number on that today to prove why it's needed, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, Senator. So we can certainly provide that information.
Okay. Any other questions from members? But this $2,000, that's the initial application fee. That's like a one-time fee, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. All right. Seeing no further questions, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet, Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, 301 KAR 1410 and 301 KAR 4091. 091 has a staff suggested amendment.
301 KAR 1410 is being amended to prohibit bow fishing at Carpenter Lake, Clear Creek Lake, Greenbow Lake, Lake Carnico, and Lake Reba.
301-4091 establishes requirements for buying and selling mounted wildlife to establish definitions, clarify exemptions, and registration. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Brian Clark, Deputy Commissioner for Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources.
Thank you.
Stephen Fields, Staff Attorney for the Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources.
Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. As usual, it would not be Administrative Regs Subcommittee meeting without the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Any questions on this set of regs? Representative Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. Why were these specific lakes pulled off of the bow fishing, and what type of fish are that they were bow fishing for? I know down the western part of the state we've got a severe problem with invasion carp, and we're doing anything to limit those, but just a little clarification's all. Thank you.
That's a totally reasonable question, and would expect that. Essentially, these are small lakes that have residences immediately around them. And most of the folks who are coming to bowfish are bowfishing at night, and they're using relatively loud motors and lights. And so we've received multiple complaints regarding the use of those boats and equipment by the neighbors. And so we're trying to be good neighbors on these particular lakes. There's also, in some of these lakes, we have stocked triploid or sterile grass carp for controlling vegetation to improve angler access. And so there's not as much vegetation for people to get hung up in and then compete with right around the perimeter of the lakes. And so bow fishers, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, may shoot those grass carp, which have been stocked there by the department to control that vegetation. So this would allow those carp to persist. Again, in this case, they're triploid or sterile, and we buy them from vendors that certify that. And so they're not reproducing in the lake. We stock them, they grow, they continue to eat that invasive or undesirable vegetation to make the fishing as optimal as possible. So it's a combination of being responsive to our neighbors who have had issues with the bow fishing on these small lakes, and then also trying to provide the best fishing opportunities that we can.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You are welcome. Any other questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Justice and Public Safety Cabinet, under Department of State Police, we have 502 KAR 15020, 502 KAR 35010, 020, 030, 040, and 050. 502 KAR 45005, 15, 35, 45, 75, 85, 105, 115, and 150, all with staff suggested amendments.
502 KAR 15020 amends to add a provision requiring the department to locate, order removal of, and send notification to the owner of vehicles that are abandoned on the rights-of-way of state highways, county roads, or city streets, and to make minor updates. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
502, 35, 010, 020, 030, 040, and 050 are being amended to clarify existing language, include submission requirements, remove outdated terms and requirements, and include the completion of certain forms. 502, 45, 005 is being amended to remove outdated content. 502, 45, 015 is being amended to reflect the current educational and employment qualifications and reflect changes in testing and the order of test administration. 502, 45, 035 is being amended to clarify the application process. 502, 45, 045 is being amended to reflect the designation from a written examination to an aptitude examination and include clarifications to the procedures used. 502, 45, 075, and 085 are being amended to make clarifications and technical changes. 502, 45, 105 is being amended to add statutory authority regarding how a cadet trooper may be dismissed during the probationary period with or without cause. 502, 45, 115 is being amended to reflect the current practice of the department and establish that a response is not issued by legal counsel within 30 days of the receipt of the appeal. 502, 45, 150 is being amended to reflect a change to the test administered and replace the content-based task test with the physical fitness test. The staff suggested amendments to these regulations amends various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A and make technical changes.
Committee will stand at ease. Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Barker. I'm Assistant General Counsel for the Cabinet, and I'm here representing the Department of Kentucky State Police.
Thank you. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments? Second. We have a motion and a second. Without objection, is so ordered. Any questions or comments on this set of regs? Co-Chair Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to go back to the very first reg that was mentioned KAR 15020 concerning the abandoned vehicles. And as I'm looking at that, it talks about minor updates to basically locating, removing abandoned vehicles on the right-of-ways. What are you specifically proposing there?
You're updating for the sunset. We have changed some outdated language about notices, which basically is affixing a sticker when it has been noticed that those vehicles have been there for a period of time. And I believe we have a representative from state police who might have more information.
Good afternoon, committee. It's Major Matt Johnson. I'm the West Operations Division Director for the Kentucky State Police. Essentially updating this KAR just updates the language as in state roadways, as well as the right-of-ways and city streets, and basically anywhere that a vehicle could be parked impeding the flow of traffic, removal authority. The sticker that is affixed is an internal KSP document that is only for our tracking purposes only. It's I don't have a copy of one right here with me. I'm not sure if you could see it from my phone or not, but you'll see it's a bright orange thing. It's very hard to remove from the vehicle, and that's an identifying mark that we use internally for our troopers once we identify a vehicle that's been there, and it has the officer's initials and the date and time stamp, so that we make sure that we give it the appropriate amount of time before removing. Of course, we would have to remove it immediately if it's a traffic hazard.
If I may follow up, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Major. So once that sticker is placed there on that vehicle, how much time is allotted until that vehicle is actually removed?
3 days, Mr. 3 days.
Okay, and if I may follow up, then one more, please. When that removal takes place, and I've actually had concerns from a couple of constituents on this issue, which operate towing services, and in a situation where they would be contacted, and I don't know exactly how that process works of how it goes around, who comes and removes those, but I've had questions of the individual service that did remove those vehicles, and then the owners weren't able to be found or contacted, or they didn't know who owned the vehicle. Many times they were stuck with these vehicles of storing them for, on occasions, maybe even months at a time. So I guess my question is, maybe we need a little bit better process of following up of who the owners are of these vehicles, if they're abandoned, or maybe they was even wrecked and somebody abandoned it and left it, or broke down, and the towing services or the owners of these companies are stuck with those. So is there anything that maybe you could update me on that just a little bit?
Sure. What we typically do is we have what's called a rotating record log at each post. If you're a member of one of the record agencies or services in the community and want to be part of that, the state police receives absolutely no funds from you being on that. You just have to comply with certain rules and regulations as in policies, which is like producing a document that shows exactly what your fees will be. So somebody can't strong arm somebody in the middle of the night and raise fees or charge additional fees. As long as they're in line, they can be a part of that rotating record log. When a trooper arrives on scene to a vehicle and they need it towed, they notify post for next on the list, NOL. That's a rotating log so that it's fair to everybody, and you're not just calling up your buddy, or there's the appearance of impropriety that way by doing next on the list. That log rotates around. Once the record comes out, the trooper will fill out what's called a KSP 41 on that vehicle, put the owner's information based upon the registration that is ran from dispatch at that time, and they will give a copy of that to the record service. The original copy goes back to post, and the clerks actually mail that out to the registered owner to provide the required notice as required by statute to the registered owner of the vehicle.
Okay, I understand that, and I thank you for the explanation. It's still, I think there's still maybe, and this is probably not something that we can work out here, but there still seems to be a problem many times of those individuals not being able to find who that vehicle belongs to, or who even is the owner of that, or maybe they've abandoned it, maybe they've moved, maybe they've left, they don't want nothing else to do with it, and some of the individuals that run the towing services have been left to tow that or to store that vehicle many times for weeks or even months, and basically at their own cost.
I believe so. I believe the KAR provides a remedy for that, sir. I believe that it's after 60 days that it can be, once it's noticed a second time, that it can be sold under a lien, a work order lien. I'm not sure the exact terminology, sir. I don't have the KRS in front of me. But it references that, and they should be able to recover the additional proceeds to cover the storage and towing cost from that sale.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
For clarity, there were 3 that did not have staff suggested amendments, and that was 502, 35040, 45015, and 150. Next, we have under Transportation Cabinet, Department of Highways, 603 KAR 5150 without staff suggested amendment.
This regulation is being amended to update material incorporated by reference.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
This is John Johnson, Assistant General Counsel, Office of Legal Services. I'm here today with Ricky Sizemore, Branch Manager, Permits, Transportation Cabinet.
Thank you. There are no staff amendments or committee amendments here, so we have before us the reg itself. It looks like one regarding encroachment permits. Could you explain what we're doing here?
Well, basically what we're doing, Mr. Chairman, is substituting the September 17th, 2021 permits manual into the place of the older May 2nd, 2019 version. It's just an update, adoption of the more recent permits manual.
Okay. So are there a lot of changes, wholesale changes in the manual, or what's?
If you'll let me defer to Mr. Sizemore on that. I don't think there are, but let me double check with Mr. Sizemore. Mr. Sizemore, could you answer Chairman West?
Yes, there were several minor changes, just minor updates throughout the manual that were needed. There were no major changes. I mean, we have a list of those changes that can be provided if that's needed.
That's fine. And just for explanation, so I know what's before us, is this a manual as it pertains to citizens permitting the cabinet to encroach? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, it's for like citizens wanting a driveway, driveway access to our roadway, or utility companies, encroaching on their right of way. So that type of encroachments.
So I guess my main question is it a lot more restrictive on the normal citizen?
No, there was no more really restrictions placed. It was mostly just updating some of the clarifying language.
Gotcha.
And just, yes.
No problem. Thank you. Any other questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Labor Cabinet, Occupational Safety and Health, 803 KAR 321 emergency, and 426 emergency. These do not have additional staff suggested amendments.
803-321 emergency establishes definitions and adopts the requirements of 29 CFR 1910 subpart G occupational health and environmental control. 803-426 emergency establishes definitions and adopts the requirements of 29 CFR 1926 subpart X stairways and ladders.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Robin Maples, OSH Standard Specialist with the Kentucky Labor Cabinet.
Good afternoon, Chairman West and Chairman Hill and members of the committee. My name is Chuck Stribling. I'm the Federal State Coordinator for the Department of Workplace Standards.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Sam Flynn, General Counsel with the Kentucky Labor Cabinet.
Thank you. Nice to see you, gentlemen and lady. Any questions from members? I only have one question. What's the need for the emergency reg?
So we initially filed these two regulations back with a bushel load in April of 2021, and they were set to be effective November the 30th of 2021. But we learned on November the 4th from LRC that we failed to provide a certification letter for those two regs. So these two regs simply correct the error that was made by the failure to submit that certification letter, and it simply adopts the federal requirements and ensures we keep our coverage.
Any other questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Public Protection Cabinet, Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, 804 KAR 415.
This regulation is being amended to delete all previous regulation applications except for the applicant's address and out-of-state license where necessary.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Yes, I'm sorry. It's Joshua Newton, General Counsel for the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Department of Insurance, 806 KAR 17300, 575, and 590, and 806 KAR 18030, all with staff suggested amendments.
806-17300 amends filing requirements for provider agreements, subcontract agreements, and risk-sharing agreements to update material incorporated by reference and require that sample provider agreements comply with KRS 304.12-237, which, under specific circumstances, requires insurers and third-party administrators to reimburse pharmacists for services and procedures at a rate not less than that provided to other non-physician practitioners. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
806 KAR 17575 amends to require all information to be available electronically and to update language. 806 KAR 17590 establishes requirements for insurers to report data relating to the number and type of providers that have prescribed medication for addiction treatment to its insureds, both with and without behavioral therapy. 806 KAR 18030 amends to clarify that if a parent has elected a newborn dependent to be covered under one parent's plan within the newborn's first 31 days of birth, the plan benefits of the selected parent would be primary. The staff suggested amendments to these regulations amend various sections to comply with drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon, Abigail Gall with the Department of Insurance.
Chad Thompson, General Counsel with the Department of Insurance.
Sean Orm, Executive Advisor with the Department of Insurance.
Thank you. We have staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, so ordered. I've got a question. I'm going to hold it for a second. Any other members have questions? Okay, seeing none. On KAR 17300, could you go into detail a little bit about what's going on here, what we're doing?
Do you mean, Chairman, by the amendments that we've provided, or just the
No, the reg itself. What it's doing, and then what you're changing, I guess, would be a good way to.
What it does in general is there's a filing for these provider agreements that come to us, and it kind of lays out the format of what that should look like when it comes to us. And our amendments.
So provider agreements, do you mean PBMs? Or does this cover PBMs or?
575 would be PBMs.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just healthcare providers in general.
Correct.
Okay. That's where I was a little confused. I'm sorry.
That's okay. And then the amendments we provided to this reg, several months ago, we were looking to repeal a regulation, but we had some forms in that reg we needed to disperse through the other regulations. So we're kind of finally tying that up. And we had to amend if you go into, let's see, section 2, where we discuss the HITMIC F1, that's now incorporated in 14007, whereas 17005 is the reg we're looking to repeal. And we had to amend that form within 14007 to reference this reg. So we're trying to clean everything up and tighten it up as much as possible before we repeal 17005, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm not on Senator Alvarado's committee. We have a physician on the committee here, and he's okay with it, so I guess I'm okay with it. Senator Alvarado.
One question on 575. That's obviously a very hot topic for a lot of members of the General Assembly with PBMs, and I know this has to do more with commercial pharmacy benefit managers, it sounds like. And I noticed that you're having a 60-day window for people to be able to come back. I mean, can you explain the reason to put a timeline? I'm looking at the old information there, and it doesn't appear to have any kind of a timeline, at least by regulation. Has that always been established by contract for them as far as being able to go back and have an appeal? And is this specifically for DOI? So in other words, I'm wondering why we're putting in a 60-day at the bottom of page 1 in section 1 there, section 2 rather, 1 or subsection 2. Section 2, subsection 2, the pharmacy benefit manager shall accept an appeal submitted by a contracted pharmacy on or before 60 days of the initial claim, and the pharmacy benefit manager. Is there a reason? I know that the other language below that is stricken out. Is that just, again, cleanup language? Has there been an issue with that in terms of we're trying to get to more real-time PBM analysis is kind of part of my reason for my question, and I'm wondering if we're having to do this or they have to go backwards in time for some of these things. Maybe you could comment on the need for that.
So that was actually the reason that the old language was stricken was, I think, drafting requirements to make the language flow better, but there's always been that 60-day. As far as I'm aware of. Sean Orm, do you have anything else to add to that? Or Chad?
No, I do not. Thank you.
So
I do not. My understanding is the same, Abigail.
It's not necessarily new language. It's just we've structured the subsection and paragraphs differently. So it kind of moved that language up.
Okay. Okay, very good. I know we're trying to move towards a real-time analysis of this going forward. Commercial always comes last, I suppose, in terms of you can control things within state Medicaid and those kinds of things better. To have that 60-day backup, it always makes it more difficult. But I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
I agree with you, Senator Alvarado. This will be part of a larger conversation. But any other questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Horse Racing Commission, 810 KAR 6001 with staff suggested amendment, and 810 KAR 8025 emergency and ordinary.
810-6001 amends definitions for this chapter. The staff suggested amendment amends section 1 to comply with KRS chapter 13A.
810-8025 an emergency amend withdrawal guidelines to correct typographical errors in the thresholds for clenbuterol and procaine penicillin and numbering throughout the regulation.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. This is Jennifer Woolsing. I'm the General Counsel for the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission.
Good afternoon. Mark Guilfoyle, Executive Director, Kentucky Horse Racing Commission.
I'm Bruce Howard. I'm the Equine Medical Director for the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission.
Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? Without objection is so ordered. We have a question. Do we have any questions? Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, hopefully not showing my ignorance too much on this. I'm looking at the medication guidelines, also just aware of some different litigation. Is this any way in compliance with any of the litigation with the medications that have been found in some of the horses? Or is that just mostly just fixing some cleanup language?
Thank you for the question, Senator. This is not related to any litigation involving any of our racing participants. This is just cleanup language.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I had the same question. Any other questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Cabinet for Health and Family Services, Department for Public Health, 902 KAR 10 120, 121, and 190. Several of these have staff suggested amendments.
902 KAR 10-120 amends public swimming pool requirements, including requirements relating to construction, inspections, water depth, compliance with federal standards, disinfection standards, lifeguards, and safety equipment. 902 KAR 10-121 establishes fees for reviewing construction plans and conducting construction inspections of public swimming and bathing facilities, including those with interactive water features, spray and splash pads or parks and beaches, and the annual permitting of these facilities. 902 KAR 10-190 establishes the operation and maintenance procedures of splash pads operated by a local government, including requirements for water supplies, sampling, testing, quality and treatment, sewage, wastewater, and refuse disposal, design and construction, spectator and user rules, inspections, and conditions requiring closure. The staff suggested amendments for 902 KAR 10-120 and 190 amend various sections to comply with the drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A and to make clarifications.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Sure. This is Julie Brooks. I'm the Regulations Coordinator for the Department for Public Health. And I have with me Erica Brakefield, Jennifer Burt, and Jessica Davenport. And they are all with the Public Health Protection and Safety Division.
Thank you. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments? Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, is so ordered. So we have before us 3 regs as amended by staff amendments. Just going to go ahead and open up for questions. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We dealt with, when I was in the Louisville Metro Council, I actually passed some ordinances dealing with quite a few dealing with swimming pools. One of the issues we had is in some of our areas, they didn't exist. What we had done is, at a local level, we had regulated ourselves to the point that it was no longer feasible. And so we had little areas, communities that didn't have them. I noticed back then that the standard of care was pretty low within the state of Kentucky. Locally, we did things above and beyond. Are any of these regulations today, I'm trying to just read over, it says update the disinfectant standards, but also clarifying the life and safety requirements, including the required number of lifeguards and required safety equipment. How are we changing that? Or is there going to be more than one lifeguard required if there's so many people in a pool, or any of those changes before us?
So the lifeguard requirements are, we clarified that for most of your standards pools, they're the rectangular shape. And for those that exceed 2,000 square feet of water, we clarified that they are required to have a lifeguard. In certain areas of the state, Louisville being a prime example, you have water parks that had different configurations within the pool facility. So it's difficult to go with the square footage determination. So we actually allowed for some flexibility for the pool operator to determine the minimum number of lifeguards required based on those additional features. For example, a lazy river is going to need someone who can monitor it versus someone sitting at the side of a standard, rectangular shaped pool.
If I may just follow up.
Senator Yates, please proceed.
And so that was my question then, I guess, is that when you do have this, is it based on the number of individuals? Because that's one thing I couldn't find in the law before. So whatever configuration you have, I'm sure the number of lifeguards necessary would be different if you have 10 individuals compared to 500 individuals. And I just worry about the market setting that standard themselves. Is that what this does? Does this make a determination based on the individuals?
Not necessarily. It does set the minimum number of lifeguard coverage, but then it also adds additional lifeguard coverage depending on the bather load, which again, the number of people that are at the facility at any given time, the activities, so those different, water features that a lot of pools are going to, the size of the facility, a larger pool is going to need more lifeguards. And then also the configuration, and if they, the different types of the number of shallow areas versus the number of deep water areas. So all of that will be the number of lifeguards will be dependent on all of those factors together. But we do have the minimum that's required, and then additional lifeguards may be required.
And is that in our administrative reg that we're looking at? It sounds like we have some kind of factor determination, but I'm trying to look through here and I just don't see it. Is it something that's made on an individual basis, or is there some type of system that plugs it together?
Yeah. So it is, so the regulation sets that minimum number. The additional requirements are factored in during the permitting process. So before a swimming pool opens, before a facility opens, all of that information has have been determined based off of the size and shape of the pool.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious, who commented on these lifeguard regulations relative to this administrative change?
So we received a number of comments from one homeowners association in Oldham County. They made a comment. There was the general counsel and co-owner for Kentucky Kingdom, Beach Bend, their owner commented. Some industry leaders that don't operate in Kentucky, they made some comments. And then one other private swim club owner made comments on the lifeguard requirements.
And based upon their comments, did you make any adjustments to this?
We did. The amended after comment version. So we met with, following the public hearing, and when we started working on the statement of consideration, we actually met with the industry folks, Kentucky Kingdom staff, to kind of talk through their concerns and come to a consensus. And that is the additional changes that we made that would allow a little bit more flexibility for a facility. They'd still have to meet the minimum, but then it's going to be up to the individual entity to determine kind of, their configuration and how many additional lifeguards they need.
I just have one or two more questions. I have been contacted by many pools in Louisville, particularly Kentucky Kingdom. And these regulations, I think, would make it impossible for them to even open up their wave pool. So we have a disconnect, I think, between public health and the operation of a lot of some businesses around my particular portion of Jefferson County, and I'm sure maybe in Senator Yates's portion of Jefferson County. It's my understanding, too, that the state parks are even concerned about these regulations and being able to open their pools during the summertime. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that this is one that's not quite ready for prime time, and it would be my recommendation, if it would be the will of the committee, to maybe ask for a deferral so that we can continue working on this. I think that it's really important that we don't have winners and losers when we work on regs, particularly when it comes to summertime activities. So I just put that out there, Mr. Chairman, if any other committee members.
I'd second that.
Thank you, Senator Adams. What I'm going to do right now, before we hold that thought, and we'll continue to get questions answered and let that flow through, and then we'll circle back. Are there any other questions from members? Senator Alvarado.
I just got a comment, if I could, Mr. Chairman. I've heard
this committee, you're allowed to comment.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. The concern here is with state park beaches, and I've got here some commentary that this would have an enormous, and that's in bold letters, enormous impact on the operation of Kentucky State Park beaches, likely resulting in the closure of most of them. And it says, currently, we're not required to provide lifeguards at beaches if we do not change admission or allow unaccompanied minors into the facility. The proposed regulation would require 1 lifeguard for every 100 linear feet of beachfront or fraction thereof at all times when the facility is open. A place like Lake Barkley alone would require 7 lifeguards sitting in chairs at all times, and likely more rotating duty, which would be a tremendous cost that is unbudgeted and one that likely would not be made up in revenue. And as a result, this could lead to the closure of beaches, forcing the public to less safe swimming locations such as unimproved rivers and streams, where the net result will be more drownings, plain and simple. So that's a major concern. And in a time right now where we're coming out of a pandemic, we're trying to get our tourism built back up. A lot of our state parks, which I think are great, trying to get those built back up and get people attracted. To have the pools shut down would be devastating. I know for Fort Boonesborough, which that pool is one of the main reasons people come to Fort Boonesborough State Park. So I would agree with my colleagues, something that needs to be deferred. And if not deferred, then perhaps deficient here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions or comments from members? Seeing none, coming back to Senator Adams' request, so we'll go ahead and ask the agency if they would be willing to defer.
If we could keep the other 2 regulations together with the deferral of 902 KAR 10120 and defer 10190 and 10121, then we would agree to that. That would be our preference so that the packet of regulations could go together.
If you could stand at ease just a second. For clarification, and I missed it the first go around. Maybe I misunderstood you. You're simply asking us if we do defer, to defer the whole package at one time. Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. I don't. Well, would Senator Adams have a problem with that, deferring the whole set of regulations? All 3. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So the motion we have before us, Senator Adams has made a motion for the deferral of KAR 10120, KAR 10121, and KAR 10190. Did Senator Yates second that? Okay, we have a second from Senator Yates. We have a motion. We have a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. Any objection to that? Seeing none, those regs are deferred, and I'm assuming we will see you guys back here next month.
It sounds like we will be back. Thank you.
We appreciate you doing that. Thank you. Please call the next regulation.
Department for Medicaid Services, 907 KAR 1005, 907 KAR 17005 and 10, and 907 KAR 20001 and 20. Several of these have staff suggested amendments.
907-1005 amends to delete provisions related to cost sharing in accordance with 2021 Senate Bill 55.
907-17-001-01, 907-20-001 and 020 revise definitions, delete references to the Medicaid Works program, which has ended, and update income determination standards. The staff suggested amendments amend various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Scott. I'm a Regulatory and Legislative Advisor for the Department for Medicaid Services.
Thank you. There are staff amendments. Do we have a motion for approval of the staff amendments? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. Any questions from members on this set of regs? Seeing none, please call the next set of regulations. Thank you.
Under Department for Community-Based Services, 921 KAR 4-122 emergency. This does not have additional amendments.
This administrative regulation establishes the criteria for low-income households to receive assistance in paying water or wastewater utility arrears accumulated between May 27, 2021 and September 30, 2023, utilizing funds from the Federal Consolidated Appropriations Act and the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Beacon, and I'm the Regulation Coordinator for the Department for Community-Based Services. And I do have a couple of colleagues on here as well.
Good afternoon. I'm Leanne Dixon, a Human Services Supervisor with the Division of Family Support.
Okay. There are no amendments on this reg. Any questions from members? Senator Yates.
Just one question or clarification. This would exclude, I think the only place excluded would be Louisville Metro. Is that correct? Because they have their own system in place? Or would this also be available for those constituents? Ms. Beacon?
It is available statewide, all 120 counties.
Okay, because there was a different we set up. I guess that was with the financial assistance for the rental, but this will be available for everyone.
Correct.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That concludes our agenda for today. Does staff have any housekeeping that we need to do?
Other than the next meeting would be March the 7th, Monday, March the 7th at 1 p.m.
March the 7th. Any other items to come before the committee by members? Seeing none, do I have a motion for adjournment? Motion. We have a motion. This committee's adjourned. That was quick.